The appendix. The appendix sits quietly in the lower right side of your abdomen, a tiny tube that once had a big assignment. Early humans and our plant-eating ancestors relied on it to help digest cellulose, the tough fiber found in raw leaves and bark. Back then, the appendix was part of a fermentation chamber that kept our bodies alive on a harsh plant-heavy diet. As our food changed and our brains evolved, the appendix lost its purpose. Cooking made plants easier to digest, hunting added protein, our guts shortened, our diet shifted, and the organ became obsolete. What stayed behind was a remnant, a leftover hallway in a house that had already been remodeled. People still believe the appendix does absolutely nothing, but that's not fully true. Modern research suggests that it acts as a small immune reservoir, a safe house for good gut bacteria during infections. Not essential, but not entirely pointless either. Still, the appendix is better known for one thing: the risk of inflammation that can turn it into a ticking time bomb. If this tiny organ is a forgotten relic, the next leftover is even more obvious: a set of teeth that your jaw no longer has space for. Wisdom teeth. Wisdom teeth were never a mistake. They were a backup plan for a world without blenders, soft bread, or cooked meals. Early humans had wide jaws and powerful bites built for crushing nuts, tearing raw meat, and grinding tough plants. By the time someone reached their late teens, the first molars were worn down, so a final set of teeth erupted to extend their chewing lifespan. But cooking changed everything. Softer diets meant less jaw strain, which meant smaller jaws, over thousands of generations. Our genetics adapted quickly, but the wisdom teeth did not get the memo. They still show up looking for space that no longer exists. The result is impaction, pain, swelling, and surgeries that millions of people now consider a normal part of adulthood. A common myth says wisdom teeth are completely useless, but that is not entirely accurate. In some individuals with naturally larger jaws, they erupt perfectly and function like any other molar. Most of the time, though, they are simply leftovers from a tougher world our bodies no longer live in. If wisdom teeth are a relic, the neck structure is a ghost of something far stranger: the place where your tail used to be. The tailbone. At the base of your spine sits a small triangular bone, the coccyx. Today, it helps you sit upright, anchor the pelvic muscles, and balance your posture. But its original purpose was far more dramatic. Long before humans walked upright, our ancestors used tails for climbing, balance, signaling, and swift movement through trees. The tail was a steering tool, a stabilizer, and sometimes even a social display. As early humans shifted to bipedal walking, the tail became unnecessary. Vertebra fused, muscle shrank, and what remained was the coccyx, a tiny monument to a feature evolution quietly retired. Many people still believe the tailbone does absolutely nothing, but that is not quite true. It helps support ligaments, contributes to sitting stability, and plays a small role in movement control. Every now and then, rare genetic anomalies cause a person to be born with a tail-like extension, proof that the blueprint still exists deep in the code of our bodies. The tailbone may be a harmless leftover, but the next body part still reacts every time you feel a chill or hear something startling. Goosebumps. When you feel cold, scared, or overwhelmed, tiny muscles at the base of each hair contract and pull the hairs upright. Today, it looks dramatic, but pointless. A small ripple of bumps across the skin. Long ago, though, goosebumps were part of a crucial survival system. Our ancestors were covered in thick fur, and raising that fur trapped warm air or made them look larger when threatened. It was insulation and intimidation wrapped into one instinct. As humans lost their body hair, the reflex remained even though the function disappeared. People often assume goosebumps are entirely useless now, but that's not the full story. The erector pili muscles still help with minor thermoregulation, and emotional goosebumps may link to heightened attention or strong memory encoding. Some researchers even believe they help the skin reset sensory sensitivity. Still, most of the time, goosebumps are just echoes from a colder, hairier past. And while this reflex barely works anymore, the next leftover is even stranger. A set of muscles in your ears that try to move like you're still built for the wild. Ear muscles. At the edges of your ears are 3 tiny muscles that almost no one can control. Some people can wiggle them slightly, most cannot move them at all. These are the auricular muscles, once powerful tools that helped early mammals swivel their ears towards sound. Before we had sharp vision or complex language, directional hearing was one of the best survival skills we had. Turning your ears meant locating predators, tracking prey, and detecting danger before it reached you. As humans evolved upright posture and wider visual range, the need to rotate our ears faded. The muscles weakened, the neural connections thinned, and eventually the system drifted toward dormancy. A common myth says these muscles have no purpose now, but that is not entirely true. They still activate faintly when we focus on distant or subtle sounds, almost like your brain is trying to rotate an ear that no longer responds. They are tiny reminders of a world where listening could mean life or death. But the strangest leftover is not in adults. It appears in newborns, gripping tightly with a strength that feels far older than humanity itself. Palmar grasp reflex. Place your finger in a newborn's palm and the reaction is instant. The tiny hand closes with surprising force, strong enough to cling to fabric, jewelry, even a parent's shirt. This is the Palmar grasp reflex, a behavior so old it reaches back to primates who spent their earliest days clinging to their mother's fur high above the ground. For our ancestors, this reflex was survival. Babies who could hold on tightly were less likely to fall during movement. Even today, newborns instinctively curl their toes when something touches the soles of their feet, another echo of gripping branches or a parent's body. Many assume this reflex is random or cute, but it is one of the clearest living fossils in human development. As babies grow, the reflex fades. Once motor control improves and the need for instinctive clinging disappears, the brain gradually turns the response off. Yet its presence in the earliest weeks of life shows how deeply ancient behaviors are embedded in us. The grasp reflex is impressive, but the next body part is even stranger. A feature sitting quietly in the corner of your eye, half eyelid, half memory from another species. The nictitating membrane. In the inner corner of your eye sits a tiny pink fold of tissue. Most people never think about it, and many do not even know its name. This is the plica semilunaris, the last remnant of a nictitating membrane, a transparent third eyelid still used by birds, reptiles, and some mammals. That extra eyelid slides across the eye like a built-in shield, protecting the surface from dust, water, or claws while still allowing the animal to see. Humans once relied on a similar structure, especially when early ancestors navigated harsh environments where debris, branches, and grit constantly threatened their eyes. As our behavior shifted and our face evolved, the membrane shrank. What remains is a small fold with almost none of its original function. People often assume this structure is entirely useless, but it still plays a minor role in tear distribution and eye movement. Subtle, faint, but present. It is a tiny biological bookmark, a reminder that our eyes were once built for a different world. The nictitating membrane may be subtle, but the next leftover is far more controversial, a feature that appears long before birth and stays for life. Male nipples. Before a fetus became male or female, the body follows a sacred blueprint. In those earliest weeks, hormones have not yet assigned sexual characteristics, so structures begin forming in a universal pattern. Nipples appear during this stage, long before testosterone begins shaping the rest of the male body. By the time development shifts toward the male pathway, the nipples are already built. And evolution never bothered removing them. Because of that, male nipples often spark confusion and myths. Some claim they are completely useless, others believe they are evolutionary mistakes. Neither is fully accurate. They exist because evolution prefers efficiency, reusing the same template rather than building two entirely separate designs. Removing them would require unnecessary complexity for no benefit. Male nipples do serve small roles, from sensory feedback to being part of the skin's nerve network. Not essential, but not meaningless either. They are one of the clearest reminders that human development begins long before gender takes shape. But if this body part comes from our earliest moments, the next one reaches even deeper. A tiny organ rooted in the chemistry of animals that could smell signals human no longer detect. The vomeronasal organ. Deep inside your nasal cavity sits a small pair of pits, each no larger than a pinhead. Most people never notice them, and most doctors never mention them. This structure is the vomeronasal organ, also called Jacobson's organ, a system many animals use to detect pheromones and chemical signals in the environment. Snakes rely on it to track prey, cats use it during social communication, horses curl their lips to draw scents into it. Humans once depended on this organ too, especially when scent played a major role in mating, territory, and social behavior. Over time, as vision and the language took over, the connections between the vomeronasal organ and the brain weakened. Today, the organ remains physically present, but the neural wiring behind it is mostly inactive. A common myth claims humans can still sense pheromones through this organ. Specific studies show that while we do respond to certain chemical cues, the vomeronasal organ itself is no longer functional. It sits quietly in the nose, a reminder of instincts we outgrew. But not every body part on this list is buried deep inside the face. Some cling to our limbs, tiny muscles built for climbing and gripping long before sidewalks existed. The plantaris muscle. Deep in your calf lies a thin, almost delicate muscle called the plantaris. Many people do not even know it exists. Some are born without it entirely. Surgeons often remove it for grafts because losing it has no noticeable effect on movement. Yet this tiny strand once played a much larger role. Early primates relied on the plantaris for gripping branches with their feet. It worked alongside muscles that helped flex the ankle and curl the toes, giving our ancestors the stability they needed in trees. As humans shifted toward walking upright, our feet flattened, our toes shortened, and the need for that climbing grip faded. The plantaris shrank across generations until it became a vestige, more symbolic than useful. People sometimes believe this muscle still contributes to running or jumping, but modern research shows it adds almost no power. Its most consistent role today is being removed to repair torn ligaments elsewhere in the body. It is a leftover from a time when our feet behaved more like our hands. The plantaris is subtle, but the final relic is even stranger. A trait that stubbornly grows from one specific part of the body and hints at forgotten instincts. Auricular hair. In some people, especially older men, coarse hair begins to grow from the outer ear. At first glance, it looks random, almost like a biological error, but auricular hair has roots in a much older evolutionary system. Early mammals used hair around the ears to regulate temperature, trap debris, and enhance sensitivity to subtle air movement. It was a protective ring, a kind of natural sensor. Humans lost most of that function when our ears flattened and our bodies shed excess fur. What remains is a stubborn patch of hair that appears with age. Some believe it still helps catch dust or signal airflow, but scientific evidence suggests it serves no meaningful purpose. Its growth pattern seems tied to hormonal changes rather than function, making it one of the clearest modern examples of evolutionary drift. Despite that, auricular hair fascinates researchers because it behaves differently from other body hair. It thickens with age, spreads unpredictably, and grows even in people who have little hair elsewhere. It is a harmless curiosity, an evolutionary echo that refuses to fade. But maybe nothing in our bodies is truly useless, just waiting for evolution to remember why it was there. Well, which useless body part do you still have? Leave a comment, maybe you'll find someone else with the same evolutionary glitch.